Hey kids at home, welcome to another exciting episode of Spector Creative on YouTube where we talk toys and how toys are made and, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people say there's two types of toys out there. There's the toys that toy companies create, that they own. This is called intellectual property. For example, Katy Carrot or Kooky Cucumber. Okay, you probably know them better as, Mr. Potato Head. Not every toy that a company creates actually goes on to have a long life. But, it's all part of the fun about being in a toy company, creating new IP. And then, of course, there's licensed toys, where a toy company will pay the IP owner, usually a studio or a comic book company, for rights to take their characters and turn them into toys to hopefully turn a profit. And this is a very typical royalty agreement. Usually there's an upfront fee, and then for every toy sold, a portion of that toy, the royalty percentage, is paid to the owner. And this allows a lot of different things. As an example, with a brand a company owns, like how Hasbro owns G.I. Joe, well, they obviously will make more money off of selling a G.I. Joe product because they don't have to pay a royalty to the licensor. As an example, another toy that Hasbro makes, Marvel Legends. Well, with that, because they don't own Marvel, for every Sleepwalker action figure sold, they need to pay Marvel, i.e. Disney, who owns Marvel, a fee, a percentage. And actually, Bobby Valla does a great job in a video interview we did a year ago, kind of breaking down how when a toy company owns a brand, they actually can purposely put less to make it compete with an IP brand. All right, I'll link that video at the end. But let's look at the toy industry and specifically the action figure aisle because it is just dominated by licensed toys. Toy companies own IP, and there are some. They tend to be fading in terms of IP that is not only owned, but is usually linked to theatrical releases. And sometimes these releases are also unknown properties, but because they're within a larger world, like in this case Eternals being part of the Marvel Universe, well, even a property that's totally untested can get to market. Now, it wasn't always like this, not just in terms of a brand that's unknown like Eternals or, Guardians of the Galaxy was unknown to, the toy buying public at, a time, but things were very, very different, and you can probably imagine which license it was that changed things. And looking back at Star Wars and what happened with Kenner in 1977, 78, and actually 76 when they were negotiating these deals, well, everyone knows the story about the early bird certificate. And the reason that this had to be the first Star Wars toy is because nobody wanted the license. No one did. And by the time Kenner signed up, well, it was too late to get it to market for time for the movie. Now, why is this? Well, most science fiction movies were thought of as kind of, B, C-level popcorn flicks, usually with a giant monster and a scantily clad heroine, and, well, they tended to be very formulaic and kind of peaked in the 1950s with, again, kind of the giant monster and giant insect movies. So this was kind of what most toy companies saw as science fiction movies. They weren't toyetic, they weren't used to sell product, they were just there to entertain. They were a flash in the pan, and even if they were linked to, novels of the past, well, they were really just seen as being something shiny and fun that you would go do once, and basically that was it. Because once a movie ended its theatrical run, well, that was basically it for as far as exposure to kids, and sci-fi before Star Wars really was on that hokey end. It really was Star Wars that changed things. Even movies like Planet of the Apes, which was a huge box office draw, while it did have toys, they were limited because movies were limited. Movies had a very limited time, a window, if you will, where mainstream audiences, and especially kids, could be exposed to them. And for a child to be into a movie property enough to want a toy of, Dr. Zaius, well, it usually required constant exposure. So obviously the sequels helped, but it really was television that toy companies looked at as being a much better source for mining products and properties that would translate to that toy aisle. So something like Star Trek, which is looked at as one of the, I guess, most important sci-fi TV shows of all time. Sorry, Lost in Space. But there's a reason why there were toys of Star Trek so early on, because it was on the television constantly, even when it got canceled. It came back years later. So everyone was watching it over and over again, and they would experience what was called a rerun.
What's a rerun?
And because of this, the idea of licensing movies for toys was really frowned on, and the door was basically closed, because who wants to invest all that time and money into making toys of a property that's going to be a flash pan? It's going to be in theaters for a couple months, and then that's it. I mean, yeah, sure, some movies come back, and there's midnight screenings and all that, but nobody wanted to make Star Wars. In fact, when they did sign a licensing deal, it was for a 1% royalty. And that's a far, far fetch from the 22% that companies pay these days. I think Star Wars actually demands one of the highest royalties in all of licensed products. You're basically paying almost a quarter of every dollar directly to Lucasfilm, which does affect the quality of product that you can do at price points. Now, obviously, Star Wars was a global phenomenon, and Kenner saw this, at least we kind of assumed they did, and they understood the toyetic nature of the movie, and not only did it have qualities that separated it from the old 1950s sci-fi, things like ships, things like aliens hanging out in bars. They weren't just monsters, they were just, people that you encountered. And of course, you can't discount the power of the lightsaber. A signature weapon with an instant transformation and a light-up feature. I mean, that checks off every single box a toy maker wants for a role-play item. So yeah, Star Wars was chock full of what's called toyetic elements, which is a big reason why it was so popular, but you can't discount the video phenomenon. So Star Wars came out right before VHS became a thing. You had Betamax, and then VHS hit in the early 80s, and this is what allowed children to see these movies over and over and over again. The constant viewing is what perpetuated Star Wars to maintain a very big hold on the toy aisle. Now, FFF forward to today, and well, obviously Star Wars and a lot of properties are what is pushing the toy aisle these days. So it's amazing how it's gone from begging to everything being completely topsy-turvy, to the point that the IP owners now, instead of begging toy companies to license from them, they're now literally dictating what gets put in the toy line. It is literally flipped the complete opposite of it was. It's basically that the IP owners are holding all the cards now, and toy companies will actually bid in order to get access to movie toy rights, and then the IP owners still tell the toy companies exactly what to do. They will say, even though you have the rights to make toys of, X movie, whatever it be, well, they're going to tell you, this is a character you can do, this is a character you cannot do, maybe, and yeah. I mean, a perfect example is The Mandalorian, and how you couldn't get Baby Yoda merchandise for about a year and a half. And this isn't because toy companies didn't want to. Obviously, they would have loved to have this stuff out at the exact same time. But Jon Favreau, who directed and created The Mandalorian, he didn't want product out there because he didn't want to spoil the surprise of seeing Grogu, or Baby Yoda, for the first time. So essentially, what used to be something that was really common, well, now it's become basically rare, where an IP owner, a company that develops movies or develops content, is now completely in control of the toy industry. Another great example, and I'm not picking on Disney, I'm just using very toyetic examples, Shang-Chi. Almost all of the toys are basically stuck in kind of the first half of the movie. Spoiler alert, the second half of the movie they go to a magic land filled with dragons. Now, you don't even get to get a toy of the main hero with his signature weapon until way after the movie, and you usually had to do something like go to Hot Toys and pay for a really expensive product to get this, because they wanted to keep this a big secret that he was going to get control of the rings and yada yada. So that surprise factor and being able to wow the audiences has now taken precedent over being able to sell toys. And keeping things like Baby Yoda, or what was going to happen with the signature weapon from Shang-Chi, the rings, all of that gets held back. Another perfect example with Star Wars is looking at Episode 7 and what happened with Rey. So there was a huge effort to keep under wraps the fact that it was going to be her story, that she was going to be the Jedi Padawan in this trilogy. And Disney even went out of their way to send DMCA notices to private toy collectors and parents who were posting images of toys that they actually bought that somehow got put on shelf early that showed that Rey was going to have a lightsaber. So things have really come full circle. Back in the 1970s, nobody wanted to touch movies as far as an inspiration for creating a toy line. It was thought of as a terrible idea. Science fiction movies are giant bugs, and they're in and out. But Star Wars changed all of that and proved that movies can carry a toy line, and it's now empowered the IP owners that they actually get to now tell the toy companies what to make. What will this do for the future of toys? Well, it's going to be interesting to see over the next few years, but IP owners definitely are in control now, and for the foreseeable future. I hope you enjoyed this video, and you'll take some time to share it with others. Let me know any questions you have or any areas that could use a follow-up. I always love to clarify things too. I'll see you on the comment section, and thanks again for watching. See you next time.